So I had said today that I would make a video about this because I felt like I just kind of felt like I should. So I guess I'm gonna walk for a second and then I'll walk. I decided to come outside and take a very short walk real quick before I lay down tonight. February the 11th is a day that's always rang in my spirit, I guess, or in my head. Every time February the 11th comes around, I think about my grandfather, because 1995, which was 29 years ago, which is insane to believe, that morning my grandfather had a massive heart attack. He lived. He survived it miraculously. Almost didn't because of his own stubbornness. He had started hurting around at least as early as Thursday. I do know that because he had mentioned it Thursday that he was hurting. And I think it was my mom who said, you might want to go get checked out. He didn't. And it got gradually worse. Saturday morning, he did his normal routine. I don't think I went to the store with him. Most of the time I would go to the store with him because Saturday mornings, that was a Saturday, he would go to the grocery store, those types of things. And he came home, and I remember my grandmother saying, "Joe, are you hurting?" And he ended up laying on the couch. And it was rough because he was pale. It was obvious something was wrong. His skin tone changed massively. He was white looking. And his sweat was just outrageous. He had on I don't want to say it was olive green, but I feel like it was. I feel it was an olive green shirt, button down. He always wore button downs. And it was drenched in sweat. So my great uncle James, that was his brother, his wife, second wife, Millie, was a retired nurse. So my grandmother called her. And she said, "Okay, I'll be over there." They didn't call an ambulance, which I don't know if that was good or bad. But Millie came. She lived not too far. And so Millie came. And I want to say she was driving one of them Cadillacs. They lived pretty well. They weren't, modest, modest middle class, I guess. And anyway, got him in the car, and she said, we're going to Cone Hospital. Because not Wesley Long, at that time, Wesley Long and Cone were not the same. And honestly, Cone's reputation was a lot better back then. They were known as the best heart hospital around. And so we got him there. They said if he had gotten there 15 minutes later, he would have been dead. That's how close it was. So now the trauma for me of this was my mom was not at home. And you got to understand my family dynamics at the time. It was me, my mom, my grandfather, and my grandmother. We lived under the same roof. And it was always this way. Until my grandfather died a few years later. So my mom was not there because she was out with her boyfriend at the time. I think they went to Burlington on a shopping trip or something. It was something. But this was back in the day before everybody had cell phones. Rich people had cell phones. Normal people didn't have cell phones, okay? The common man did not have a cell phone. not in 1995. So I couldn't reach her. I remember leaving voicemails, and calling his number, and calling, just trying everything. Could not get a hold of her. And that messed with me for a long time. I used to have a lot of resentment and all that because of it. I got over it. But it created this sense of abandonment. And that sense of abandonment carried on, my God, all the way into my adulthood. And I think even before that, I was already having issues of abandonment. And I'm sure there's all kinds of elements that may have played a role. The fact my dad wasn't there. There's a lot of stuff, I'm sure. And me and my dad have a great relationship now, by the way. But I don't know what all fed into it. But that moment really messed with me for a long, long time. And I got past it. But I don't know. I don't know if there's a moral to this or anything. I guess I'm just sharing. February the 11th of 1995, that's when my grandfather had this massive heart attack. And he was 70 at the time. And you see, it's things like that that make me really look at the logistics of his life. I personally feel like my grandfather was an amazing man and an incredible father figure to me. And I don't think there's any man, living or dead, that I've held to that high esteem. Yeah. So I've always attributed it to stress and bottling stuff up and not letting stuff out. And, that was a day and age where there wasn't a lot of therapy, or if there was therapy, you didn't do it because most of the people that generation especially were taught to suck it up. Just suck it up. It ain't that big a deal. Suck it up and keep it moving. Him and my grandmother both, they grew up during the Great Depression. They were tough as nails. However, stress. So I guess if there's a moral to this, I guess I can touch on that. Listen, do your best to take care of yourself. Physically, mentally, spiritually. My grandfather, he didn't take care of himself physically. And I don't think he took care of himself mentally. Even though he was a pastor, he was a minister, and a good one. But I find myself falling into the same trap many times of I'll pour out, and not get myself straightened out. You know what I mean? So it's very important to tend to your own needs as well. Very important. So I guess if I had anything to say, it would be that. But yeah, it's been 29 years, which is really mind-blowing to me. And yeah. Anyway, I just wanted to share that story. I guess that's yeah. I just wanted to share that story. Yeah.